Hi, everyone. What a story you are about to hear. I struggled with how much to put in this story because all of it is true, which is a rarity for me. And there are so many rabbit holes that I've devoted way too much time to this story. So I will try to wrap it into one short idea that is kind of not dramatic at the end of the lesson, but up till the end, it is incredibly dramatic and incredibly complicated and incredibly fun. So hang on to your hats. You might need literally some towels here. There will be head exploding moments as never before. One of the best stories I can tell, and I hope I do justice to it here. The story begins with my main man, Myron Goldsmith. Here he is in all his glory. Myron's father was Lithuanian, of course, from Vilnius, the capital. I've devoted a lot of time to studying my main man. I hear him whispering to me all the time. He's affected my pedagogy greatly and my research greatly, but I actually never physically met the guy. But I know the family. I'm a family friend at this point, and I'm super happy to introduce Myron to you. Here are his sketches from the master's thesis that he did with his mentor, Mies van der Rohe. And there's a lot about that story that we will come back to this image in the other lesson that you might have seen already on the John Hancock building. However, today we are focusing on this structure here. Can anybody guess the name of this structure? Oh, so many hands went up. Yes, exactly. This is the Farnsworth House. Probably the second most famous house in America ever built. An iconic work, a controversial work, a disaster on so many levels. Scientific, social, symbolic, you name it. We can really tear this apart, and yet it fascinates us endlessly to the point where some of us are a little obsessed. I will admit it. I will admit it. Um, just look at that Miesian detail out there of the column not being under the beam. Can you see that? Oh, what on earth? What on earth is Mies thinking here? Uh, so many stories, so many stories that we'll have to reserve on that. Why is it so powerful? Because of an image like this. You see it as being part of nature, perhaps, and perhaps apart from nature. That was good, right? I just made that up totally. Apart from nature, it's otherworldly. We could talk about Corbusier, and we could talk about Hiroshima and the museum there by Tange not touching the contaminated ground. Corbusier's relationship with the ground. We won't do that. Let's just gawk at this thing, right? There's something magical and mystical about it. And yet, of course, it is a disaster. First of all, it's in a floodplain. It floods to the point of destruction almost, completely ill-suited site for that structure. Who wants to live in an aquarium? They had to argue about getting curtains in certain spots, right? You are always visible. And that, ladies and gentlemen, leads to an entirely different rabbit hole about glass and utopian architecture and Shearbart and all of the dystopian ideas about surveillance, being watched. The novel We by Yevgeny Zamyatin immediately shows up when you start studying this. I am not exaggerating. That totalitarian state where everything is glass because Big Brother, this is before Orwell's book, by the way, way before Orwell's book. Zamyatin's book, We, has the totalitarian state, the Big Brother, looking at everyone all the time, except for pink days. And you could just kind of imagine what pink days mean. Yes, go read that book. I got crazy and I turned on the artificial intelligence robot to explore. Well, what if we looked at Katsushika? Remember the Japanese woodblock print, The Wave by Katsushika? I mashed those up together with artificial intelligence to create this. I mean, it literally took me like 15 seconds to do this. And I will never, ever make anything this remarkable in my life. I mean, I just could not believe that Katsushika blending with the flooding of Farnsworth House just happened just like that. So that is a t-shirt or an artifact to behold. And incidentally, you will be making artifacts. We have a lot to talk about artifacts. Artifacts, Mies, this story, this model, this beam being on the outside of the roof in Crown Hall at Illinois Institute of Technology. So much to say. Mies is glowering over this structure and this structure all the time. Let's just look at this structure. You could tell there's another couple of stories that I just tossed away. Let's look at this structure, right? Very unusual structure, very controversial structure, and very celebrated structure immediately, right? The clients were his department, right? But other clients pursued this structure as experimental form. So you can find examples of this at least on the internet. And I think there's one still outside of Chicago, the bank. But let's focus on the Farnsworth House. And what a sad and marvelous photo this is simultaneously. You know, Duckett took the photo, right, with his Brownie camera. And there's a long, long, fascinating story about Duckett that somebody should tell. Not me, or maybe me. We'll see at some point. There's Dr. Farnsworth looking at the sweets catalog with my main man, Myron, who put on a lab coat for the occasion. Thank you, Myron. You know, it's a wonderful photo and it's a sad story too because of the lawsuit that took place. There's a horrible, horrible pain that people experienced through all of this story from the lawsuit, where she felt like a caged animal in that house. And one of the controversial things which makes this super sad is not just the trial, but, you know, this photo in particular. I could talk about it more, but I don't need to. Dr. Farnsworth, we still celebrate her by leaving that name on the structure, right? The Farnsworth House. But, you know, it was a torturous story here where she says, you know, I am in a cage, and Mies is talking about free space, but it's not anything but free. Is it a part of nature, or is it a part from nature, right? And she wrote the poem, and she called the poem The Artifact, which is why I want the artifact later in the course. The story just does not stop. Literally, it does not stop. This is a little alternate path. This is not Farnsworth House. This is the 50 by 50 house. so-called 50 by 50. And again, that's a crazy story. It's really not 50 feet by 50 feet. It's 48 feet by 48 feet. But Philip Johnson, who's a super controversial guy, also uh, nicknamed it the 50 by 50. And I devoted a lot of time, but other people devoted more time to it. So here we have the essay by Denise Marconish, who was the curator at the Mass MoCA Museum, saying, "You say you want an infinite revolution." Denise came to the studio to talk to the students. It was fantastic. But what are we looking at? And we're looking at Inigo Manglano Ovalle's work at the museum. It is the 50 by 50 house upside down. Inigo won a MacArthur Award, the Genius Grant, and Inigo and I became acquaintances because of my crazy passion for this whole project. Inigo came to the studio several times now, I think twice at least. And, you know, he's the head of the Department of Art at Northwestern University, but his artifact is just over the top, right? It's a museum piece of celebrated art that people have discussed a lot. There's many theoretical precedents for this work. Why is it upside down? What is on the top, which is actually the bottom? You can't see it in this photo. There's a secret. I'll tell you the secret if you're interested, but not right now. Who else was involved in this project at Mass MoCA? No, none other than Bill Baker, chief designer of the Burj Khalifa, one of the greatest structural engineers on planet Earth, probably one of the top, right? Bill is a friend of our department. He has come many times. And this is Bill creating a sophisticated model from plastic cutlery knives for picnics and painter's tape to study the performance of this. And I devoted several studios to the performance of this from a scientific point of view. Very problematic, not for symmetric loads, but for asymmetric loads, as Bill is pointing out with his pinky. And Myron really worked on this in an extraordinary manner with the museum piece that wasn't built, and that leads to whole other stories which we cannot talk about. Let's keep on Farnsworth. Go back to Farnsworth. That was 50 by 50. Farnsworth is certainly indebted to the thought processes that went into the 50 by 50. But all of that is filled in with these other stories. So Zamyatin's novel from 1921. Then Sergei Eisenstein, the famous filmmaker, enters the story with his film called The Glass House. And Charlie Chaplin is involved in this story. It's really kind of a rabbit hole that you might not get out of. And I almost didn't get out of it. I'm not sure I'm out of it yet. The novel We is in the center of the slide. Here it is, Mas Lietuviškai in Lithuanian. We had the interdisciplinary studio with Lithuanian students looking at this project, not Farnsworth, but 50 by 50. And in the course of all of the studies, of course, you keep running into Sergei Eisenstein. But the thing that really made my head literally explode was that Eisenstein intersects with a young man called Disney here in California. And all of that work was studied by Dustin Condren, who's a professor at Oklahoma State University, I think. I haven't spoken to Dustin in a while. He and I became close. His sister went to Cal Poly, which is great. But Dustin actually came to the studio several times, and a wonderful scholar, a wonderful guy. You know, it's just too much. It's too much. And all of these studies then feed into other studies before them. And here's Shearbart. So you may have heard me mention Shearbart in the song Myron Built a House, which is one of the great hits on SoundCloud these days. Um, and at that point, I have to get out of the rabbit hole because I don't even know why I got into that tunnel in the first place, going into Fidel Castro and prisons and dystopia and utopia, right? So it's constantly flipping between this utopian ideal, which I think Mies really wanted, absolutely, and this dystopian reality that Dr. Farnsworth felt. And then we have to simply look at this. I'm not going to show you this film right now because you need to have it loud. It's an excerpt of a 12-minute film by Inigo. Let me just give you the backstory, some unbelievable facts. So Inigo is the artist, but he's also the window washer in Farnsworth. So he was commissioned to make a film about Farnsworth, and he soon realizes that he's not allowed to touch the building, to actually do anything like drape fabric over the building, or literally to even touch the building. So he's spending reconnaissance time out there in Plano, Illinois, and he notices a window washer come once a week to do the outsides of the windows, and then the other week to do the insides of the window. And then he goes watching this guy, and suddenly he has the insight. He says, I know, I'll learn how to wash windows, and I'll be the window washer in this film, Le Baiser, the kiss. So he hires the window washer to teach Inigo how to do it, and he never really learned. You could see he's a terrible window washer. But why is he washing the windows? So he can't physically touch the building. The squeegee is touching the building. So you hear the sound of the squeegee when he's outside of the building, kissing the building, caressing, smooching. There's no other word than smooch when you hear that sound. That's why I want you to wear headphones. And the woman on the inside is not looking at Inigo, and he is looking at her. Believe me, he's looking at her. She's got headphones on and she's listening to music, and she will not look at him, except for one spot in the film where they make eye contact. And it's I don't remember if that part is in the excerpt or not, but it's certainly in the full film. And what is she listening to? She's listening. He told me, Inigo told me this. I mean, this is rabbit hole squared. She's listening to a guitar solo by Ace Frehley of Kiss, the band Kiss, but it's stretched out to sound like the smooch where he's smooching the glass with his squeegee. It just never ends. It never ends, these rabbit holes. And then the biggest rabbit hole of all, this story of the Jewish fraternity is just overwhelming. Overwhelming. I'll give you a synopsis if you want. I'll have to give a whole lesson on it later. Duckett, I mentioned Duckett, the guy who took the picture with the Brownie camera of Dr. Farnsworth and Myron, is the contact, is the go-between between the Jewish fraternity, and there's another architect also involved, but they wanted to hire the world's most famous architect, Mies van der Rohe, to build a fraternity. And then because they were a bunch of fraternity brothers, they didn't have any money, so they didn't get the thing built, but Mies designed it. And they had to argue for who's going to own the drawings. And I think they scraped together some money. I don't remember that part of how they actually got, not a lot, like $500 or $1,000. But back in that time, in the Miesian era, that was a lot of money, I suppose. And then the project died. And then all of the fraternity boys died, except for one who kept the drawings but didn't tell anybody really about it. And then when he died, the widow opens up a suitcase up in his closet or something and finds the drawings and says, "What the heck's going on here?" So she contacts everybody, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, baby, gets involved, and the drawings are there. But then the story just keeps getting nuttier because of the Jewish deli guy who's excited about this type of architecture and Jewish delis, and made this guy a lot of money. And eventually he was the last boy in that fraternity, and he ended up being a multi millionaire. And he said, "Let's build it." So they actually built the structure. So it is, I think, finished. I haven't seen it yet. It is the I think they're calling it the Mies van der Rohe building. It's the Museum of Art at Indiana University. Oh, there's Brenner. There's Daniel Brenner. I'm glad I got that name right there. That's the Jewish connection of he was in Mexico. He had quit architecture, and Duckett had to go down to Mexico to find this guy, like in Puerto Vallarta, just relaxing, because he was Jewish. He was the intermediary. Isn't that crazy? I could not make this up. I literally could not make this up. So now the story gets a little crazier, and then so that was the climax of the story, okay? And now it's kind of going to go downhill. There's a few fun dipsy doodles left, but the ride is essentially over, and the ending is not exciting at all. Through all of this work with Bill Baker and other people who are just indebted to Myron. Bill spoke at Myron's funeral services about the deep relationship and the deep mentoring that took place. And I feel it too, even though I never met Myron. I am Myron's student, in spirit. We have Myron's notebook, the spiral bound notebook here of Myron on the calculations of the Farnsworth House. So he was the designer of the structure. He was the contractor. Mies, of course, is the architect. And then I get in trouble. I mean, this is really, really, really a minefield. You cannot believe how much trouble I've gotten into by even suggesting that Myron had a major role in this house, because of the incredible adulation that surrounds Mies and his legacy. For the record, Myron was the contractor, unarguably, and he did a lot. And I'm going to argue that he really did focus on this highlight, really, of the whole thing, right? The way we started, that the way that column, here it is, the way the column intersects that beam. Mies wanted this. There's no question that Mies wanted it, but how did Myron make it happen, right? And there's actually 3 levels of stiffness that occur. And today, we would not design it the same way, because each level of stiffness, the eccentricity of the column to the beam actually adds a kind of a rigid link stiffness. If you're a technical person, you know what I mean. The actual cantilevering of the column is a source of stiffness. But individually, they wouldn't work today for codes in wind, but in combination, they are just enough by today's codes, which is, an incredible story, because they tried to recreate the spirit of the design in the new structure. Now, it's not exactly the same because of code restrictions, but they really, really tried to make it happen. And that eccentricity is the thing about the house, as far as I'm concerned. It's that connection right here. But that's not summarized on this page, and now the story gets we're down. we're coming back to the ticket booth on our ride here. This is Myron's printing, a really nice printing. This is in pounds and inches, of course. Getting the load on the beams of the roof of the Farnsworth house. So getting the load on those beams that we saw up here. You see them on those beams. So it's nice to have construction photos. You could really learn a lot about buildings by looking at construction photos. So there's 6 foot, about 2 meters on center here, and he's getting the force per square foot or force per area. And here we have drawings, right? These are structural drawings, and these are treasures that I have because of my deep, deep dive into this topic. And, just how cool is this to see House for Dr. Edith Farnsworth near Plano, Illinois, July 21st, 1949. Man, I just get a shiver looking at that. And of course, you could do W times L squared divided by 8. You don't need to know this formula. It's the algebraic way of doing things. The answer here is 1,200,000 inch-pounds of moment. And let's end the story in a kind of a deflated manner by looking at it with the modern Mueller-Breslau method. So I took 846. You could see the 846 here. The length is 30.5. So I think I did 30.6 there, but I should have done. Maybe I made a tiny mistake, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. How do you do this in the modern Mueller-Breslau method? If we're looking for the right vertical reaction, of course, we know what the force is. We would perturb the right vertical reaction. If we're looking for the moment, though, we have to perturb it based on the unknown being delta. So I actually don't know where this video will be in the order of the entire course, but the perturbation is delta on the either side of the cut. Or where you inserted the hinge. So you make a mechanism. It's a machine. You could see the right pin is sliding laterally. It's unstable. That's the modern Mueller-Breslau method. And you divide all of it by delta, which is radians, but I think I show it as degrees here, perhaps. Or I just showed it symbolically. Delta for the moment. So you distribute the load on either side of the kink that is formed. And there's only one equation in my whole book, the unknown times delta plus each force multiplied by each loft is equal to 0. Here, the forces oppose the lofts. So that's negative work. And you bring that over to the other side, it becomes positive work. You divide by delta, which is that angle in radians. And I was using feet. Myron used inches, and I get the exact same answer as Myron. And Myron is again saying, attaboy. Nobody gives me an attaboy except Myron, my main man. So thank you for your patience through this incredible story. I hope I inspired you to at least go look at, for sure, go look at The Kiss by my friend Inigo, MacArthur scholar. Do get this. I'll give you the version that I've read. You could actually look through the website of Mass MoCA for the house that was built there. You could read. I think the essay is still up. You could actually find the poem by Dr. Farnsworth online. It's called Artifact. And maybe we'll end with this image because I do think it's a sad story about just things gone wrong. Maybe we can learn something from it and take it forward. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I hope you loved the show.